Have you ever realized that the whole world raised you to fear loss? Since childhood, you've been told that holding on was a virtue, that letting go was weakness, that letting go was defeat. But this moral lesson was never about your freedom. It was always about control. Whoever teaches you to cling also teaches you how to manipulate you. Because all it takes is threatening to take away the thing you most fear losing, and that's it. Your will is no longer your own. And here comes the truth no one likes to hear. Attachment is not love. It is not security. It is not virtue. Attachment is a leash. It's the easiest chain to pull against you. And worse, the more you believe you need to hold on to everything at any cost, the more predictable you become. Easier to use, more vulnerable. This is the policy guided by reality. The enemy doesn't need to knock you down hard, just poke at what you can't let go. The controversial and brutal thing is that power lies not in achieving more, but in needing less. The end justifies the means, and the smartest means is detachment. Because when you learn to say, "I don't need," no praise can buy you, no rejection can paralyze you, no loss can destroy you. It's the silence that scares you. You don't react, you don't beg, you don't bow, and suddenly the other person discovers they can no longer control you. This is why Machiavelli asserted that it's better to be feared than loved. Not because of irrational fear, but because those who don't depend on approval are free, and the free are always feared. Have you noticed this? The employee who doesn't fear being fired commands the most respect. The person who doesn't fear being alone attracts the most genuine presence. The investor who doesn't fear missing an opportunity reaps true fortune. Virtue and fortune accompany those who don't tremble in the face of loss. Now, here's the question that opens the wound. What about you? Can you imagine what would happen if everything you most fear losing were ripped away from you today? Would you fall apart, or would you discover that deep down you've never needed it so much? The answer hurts, and that's precisely why it frees. This is the secret almost no one reveals. True power lies not in achieving more, but in releasing faster than anyone expects. And when you understand this, no one can hurt you. No enemy, no manipulation, no social theater. But be careful. This path is not comfortable, it is corrosive, because it forces you to see where you are still chained, and that is precisely the journey you will begin now. The secret to why attachment is the easiest chain to use against you. Attachment is an invisible chain that many carry without realizing it. It appears to offer security, but in reality, it hands the key to your control into the hands of another. Just think of how often a person stays in a job they hate only because they fear losing their steady paycheck. It's as if accepting golden shackles in exchange for false stability. Machiavelli warned that decisions based on real human nature, not ideals, are those that reveal the battlefield where power manifests itself. When someone discovers what you most fear losing, they also discover the quickest way to bend your will. The chain of attachment isn't made of iron, it's made of the very illusion that you need to hold onto it at any cost. Note that even in relationships, attachment is the most commonly used weapon against you. A partner who senses your emotional dependence easily manipulates your behavior. Prolonged silence, a veiled threat of abandonment, and you're already giving in on points you'd never otherwise give into. It's in this game that the better to be feared than loved motto takes hold. Not because love is worthless, but because when attachment mixes with love, it becomes poison. Reality-driven politics shows that the most exploited vulnerability is not physical, but emotional. And in practical life, whoever controls your attachments controls your choices, from excessive consumption to how you deal with rejection. That's why great strategists cultivate a specific kind of detachment. It's not cold indifference, but keeping a clear eye on one's own dependencies. Think of an investor who doesn't put all his capital into a single stock. He knows that by blindly clinging to a bet, he risks losing everything. The same goes for friendships, businesses, and even personal projects. The more you tie your identity to a single thing, the easier it becomes for someone else to use that tether as a noose around your neck. The calculated use of force in this case isn't external, it's internal, countering one's own impulses to hold on too tightly. Some people confuse attachment with loyalty, but they are quite different things. Loyal, self-made armies are not sustained by dependence, but by mutual trust. A leader who retains followers solely out of fear that they will lose something, a benefit, a position, a promise, doesn't have an army, he has hostages. This is where the appearance of virtue becomes a mask. It seems like generosity, but it's pure manipulation. And you, in your daily life, can see how companies use exactly this. Points programs, subscriptions with cancellation penalties, contracts that make you feel like losing is worse than winning. It's the same logic, keeping you trapped by the feeling that letting go is impossible. The secret, therefore, is not to eliminate all ties, but to understand which of them are chains in disguise. Constant adaptability is key to avoiding this kind of trap. Whenever you feel you need something or someone too much, ask yourself, if this is taken away from me, who will I be? This simple question reveals where attachment has already become weakness. And herein lies the provocation. Perhaps what weighs most heavily on you is not what you carry, but the fear of letting go. And precisely when you believe that losing is the worst-case scenario, the portal opens to understanding how enemies transform your desires into invisible weapons. The enemy rarely attacks head-on. He prefers to observe from afar, silently, until he discovers what truly ignites your eyes. Your desire is the crack through which he enters. It's no wonder Machiavelli reminded us, decisions based on true human nature always reveal more than rhetoric. If you desire recognition, the enemy offers you false applause. If you seek power, he hands you titles without substance. If you yearn for love, all he has to do is walk away for you to chase after it. Desire, when exposed, is like a password written on a piece of paper left on a table. Anyone can use it against you. And the most dangerous thing is that we almost never perceive the subtlety of this manipulation. A simple example. Think about the marketing that moves the world. Behind the screen, experts study what you desire, status, beauty, belonging, and transform them into consumption triggers. The end justifies the means principle comes to life in every advertisement promising happiness in a perfume box or power in a new car. It doesn't matter if the delivery is illusory. What matters is that your desire has already become a tool of control. This is politics guided by reality, not by how the world should be, but by how it actually works. And in this game, even those who seem free are trapped by invisible desires that guide their actions without them realizing it. Now imagine it on a personal level. A boss who senses your need for approval might delay promotions just to keep you constantly chasing. A partner who recognizes your need for attention might withdraw at strategic moments, making you beg for something that should be natural. This is the calculated use of force in its most subtle form. It's not the shouting nor the threat, but the strategic silence that shapes your actions. The enemy doesn't need to lift a finger, they just need to trigger your desire. And when that happens, you begin to obey without even realizing it. What makes this weapon so effective is precisely its invisibility. From the outside, observers see only seemingly voluntary choices. You buying what you don't need, accepting tasks you don't want, tolerating behaviors you despise. But behind this lies a Machiavellian chessboard in which your needs are the moving pieces. Virtue and fortune are measured not only by the courage to act, but also by the coldness of not reacting when your desires are nudged. It takes almost brutal strength not to chase after every shiny lure thrown at you. The question is how to escape this game. The answer lies not in eliminating desires, but in unmasking those that have become chains. Ask yourself, does this desire move me or imprison me? If the answer is the latter, you've already found the weapon someone can use against you. Detachment, at this point, ceases to be poetry and becomes a survival strategy. And here begins the turning point. When losing something ceases to be defeat and becomes freedom, the enemy loses its most valuable ammunition. There's an almost imperceptible moment when the pain of loss dissolves and gives way to a strange sense of relief. It's when the heart realizes that carrying that weight was harder than letting it fall. Many believe that loss is always synonymous with failure, but this is just a narrative invented to keep people trapped. Machiavelli would say that the end justifies the means, and in this case the means may be precisely letting go. By letting go of something that seemed essential, you discover that you not only survive without it, but breathe better. It's the human paradox. What seemed like defeat is, in fact, the beginning of freedom. See how this manifests itself in common situations. When someone is fired from a job they hated, the first reaction is panic. How will I live without this salary? But weeks later, how many discover new paths that previously seemed impossible? The loss, which felt like punishment, opens doors to previously unseen possibilities. It's politics guided by reality. No one chooses to lose, but it's precisely in this empty space that creativity flourishes. The same occurs in relationships. How many people only rediscover their true identity when the dependent relationship finally ends? This relief is, in a way, a form of calculated force, only applied against oneself. It's not about being cold or insensitive, but about understanding that it's not necessary to hold on to something just because it's always been in your hands. Think of an investor who sells a falling stock. At first glance, it seems like defeat. But by freeing up capital, there's room to invest in something more promising. The same goes for life. Sometimes losing isn't a sign of weakness, but of strategy. Virtue and fortune favor those who know when to hold on and when to let go. The curious thing is how society conditions everyone to believe that holding on is nobler than letting go. The appearance of virtue lies in holding on tight, even when the ship is already sinking. It's as if abandoning a wrong path were a greater sin than persisting until destruction. This mentality is what keeps so many people trapped in toxic situations, thinking that resilience is synonymous with character. But here's the shock. Often, character is precisely having the courage to leave the table, even when everyone is yelling at you to stay. Better to be feared for letting go than loved for dragging yourself along. What truly liberates is the moment you understand that losing doesn't diminish your worth. On the contrary, each loss carries with it the chance to reorganize your life according to what truly matters. Loyal armies of your own are formed not from chains, but from the conscious choice to move forward. Detachment, in this sense, is a way of declaring independence, and it is at this point that the most silent power of all emerges. Detachment as a cruel form of invisible authority. The most feared power is not the one that shouts, but the one that doesn't need to say anything. Detachment, when mastered, becomes the cruelest weapon because it disarms without violence. Imagine a player who doesn't react when his pieces are taken. The opponent despairs, realizing he can't reach someone who doesn't fear losing. Machiavelli would say this is politics guided by reality. When the other realizes you don't depend on him, the entire theater of manipulation collapses. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is simple, not bothering to hold anything that could be used against you. This silence of detachment is more disconcerting than 1,000 words. Consider a relationship where one partner hopes to control the other through jealousy. When the other reacts with desperation, the manipulator gains power. But when there's a calm go, the game is over. It's cruel because it effortlessly dismantles the controlling person's strategy. Better to be feared than loved doesn't just refer to war, it also applies to human relationships. Those who don't beg for permanence become unpredictable, and the unpredictable is always feared. In the business world, the same principle applies. A company that shows excessive dependence on a single customer is at the mercy of its demands. One that builds its own loyal armies, multiple customers, different revenue streams, can say, "We don't need you," without trembling. This detachment is cruel because it robs the other of the feeling that they can dictate the rules. And it is at this point that virtù and fortuna meet. The courage to let go and the luck that accompanies those who don't bow down. The tables turn when the adversary discovers that they cannot manipulate your needs. The curious thing is that detachment doesn't scream power, it whispers it. It's an almost invisible force, but it erodes others' attempts at control. Think of a negotiation. The buyer who shows eagerness to close quickly loses leverage, but the one who displays calm, even willing to leave the table, ends up imposing their terms. This is the appearance of virtue used in reverse. Not to appear nice or conciliatory, but to appear absolutely serene in the face of what others consider vital. The calculated use of force in this scenario is precisely not having to use it. The cruelty of detachment lies in revealing the other's powerlessness. It's not about revenge, but about clarity. No one can dominate someone who has already decided not to be bound. Constant adaptability is the virtue that sustains this position. Those who learn to move without carrying chains discover that silence can be fiercer than the sword. And yet this state opens the door to something even more radical. Understanding why those who fear nothing can never be controlled. The essence of control is always anchored in the fear of loss. That's why those who fear nothing of loss become unattainable. If you don't buckle under the threat of being alone, no one can use abandonment as a weapon. If you don't depend on wealth to sustain your identity, no amount of financial blackmail can bring you down. Machiavelli observed that reality-driven politics is built precisely on the manipulation of these fears. But when someone decides to live with the certainty that everything is transitory, they dismantle the chessboard of power. Better to be feared than loved takes on another meaning. Feared is he who doesn't need the approval of others to exist. The enemy, when trying to reach someone without attachments, experiences the frustration of someone shooting arrows against the wind. Imagine a negotiation where the threat is, you could lose the contract. What happens when the answer is, great, this frees me to seek better ones? Power changes hands. Virtue and fortune smile upon those who have the courage to let go. This type of person seems dangerous because they don't fit into the common logic of the social game. And this causes discomfort, as most people only understand power through the lens of dependence. Everyday life is full of examples. An employee who doesn't fear losing their job because they've developed multiple sources of income becomes much harder to exploit. A partner who knows how to live well alone isn't held hostage by emotional manipulation. This is the calculated use of force at its most elegant. It's not the cry of revolt, but the peace of mind of knowing there's nothing holding them back. It's as if the whole world were trying to chain someone who's already thrown away the keys. There's no controlling what's already free inside. This stance doesn't mean an absence of bonds, but rather an absence of chains. Loyal, self-made armies don't follow out of fear of punishment or attachment to rewards, but because they choose to remain. This changes the entire power dynamic. You stop holding people or situations back by the threat of loss and start sustaining everything through trust and respect. The appearance of virtue in this case isn't a mask, but clarity. Those who truly want to stay, stay. This is the kind of force that becomes nearly invincible because it doesn't depend on social theatre. Those who fear nothing to lose have already understood that true power lies not in accumulating, but in being able to let go. And this, paradoxically, is what gives them greater mastery. Constant adaptability is the hallmark of this state. If something falls, it reinvents itself. If someone leaves, it continues. This is the Machiavellian paradox. Letting go is, in fact, the most solid form of possession. After all, only those who are ready to let go at any moment truly hold on. The Machiavellian paradox, letting go is the most solid form of possession. The paradox is cruel and fascinating. The more someone tries to hold on tightly to something, the more fragile their possession becomes. Have you ever noticed how those who try to imprison love end up suffocating it? Or how companies that try to retain customers at any cost end up being hated? Machiavelli knew that power is not born of rigidity, but of the ability to let go when necessary. Politics guided by reality shows that letting go is not weakness, it is strategy. The end justifies the means, and sometimes the wisest means is detachment. Those who master this game discover that, by needing nothing, they begin to hold everything more solidly. Think of leaders who cling not to positions, but to causes. These are rarely defeated, because their power lies not in the throne they sit on, but in their ability to rise up without losing authority. It's the same in everyday life. Those who cling to the title of boss lose respect as soon as the position is gone. Those who inspire loyal armies of their own continue to be followed even when their crown is removed. Better to be feared than loved doesn't mean brutality, but autonomy. Respect is born from detachment from titles and loyalty earned through virtue and fortune, not brute force. Even in finance, this paradox appears. The investor who doesn't desperately cling to a bad asset can sell it and reinvest in something better. They don't lose, they trade. The same happens with ideas, projects, or relationships. Letting go is the condition for receiving what truly matters. The appearance of virtue may deceive those who insist on holding on to what has already rotted, but the reality is simple. Letting go is an act of courage that redefines possession. And this calculated use of inner strength gives the individual an advantage in any social game. The paradox becomes even more evident when we look at the psychology of power. Those who beg for acceptance become prisoners. Those who say, "I don't need it," dominate the scene. Detachment transforms what seemed unstable into something solid, precisely because it no longer depends on the other to exist. This state is uncomfortable for those who seek to manipulate, because it takes away their ammunition. Constant adaptability ensures that even in the face of loss, a person doesn't crumble. On the contrary, it opens space for new achievements that only appear when their hands are free. The truth is that letting go, far from being a defeat, is the most brutal form of silent authority. It's an implicit warning. Nothing holds me back, and that's why nothing brings me down. This Machiavellian paradox isn't just philosophy, but a life practice. Those who understand it no longer carry invisible chains. But the curious thing is that many still walk around heavy without realizing it. And this is where another essential point emerges: the invisible weight you carry without realizing it, and how to let go of it may be costing you the freedom you seek. Chains aren't always made of iron. Often, they're made of expectations, fears, and memories that cling to us like unseen dust. The invisible weight is treacherous because it accumulates slowly. You wake up tired, but you don't know why. You walk through life as if you always owe someone something, unaware that the debt doesn't exist. It was invented. Machiavelli reminded us that decisions based on real human nature are crueler than those based on ideals. And the reality is that most people drag invisible sandbags around, believing them to be part of their identity. This burden can take many forms: the need to be accepted, the fear of disappointment, the obligation to always appear strong. All of this creates a psychological prison where the individual acts less out of desire and more out of obligation. The appearance of virtue becomes a burden, smiling when you don't want to, helping when you can't, saying yes when everything inside screams no. This is the calculated use of force against oneself, but in a destructive way. Better to be feared than loved applies here, ironically. Often you are loved because you overextend yourself to fulfill roles that don't belong to you. Letting go of this burden requires courage and constant adaptability. But it's not an abstract act, it's practical. It can start with something simple, like reviewing your schedule and eliminating commitments that don't serve you. It's saying no to pointless meetings, cutting energy-draining expenses, or even unfollowing people who only reinforce toxic comparisons. It's like trading a backpack full of rocks for a lightweight water bottle. Relief comes quickly, and the empty space left inside you can finally be filled with something real. Virtue and fortune favor those who are unafraid to clear the path. There's also the weight of old stories. Perhaps you carry phrases spoken by parents, teachers, and bosses as if they were absolute truths. You're not good enough. You can't fail. No one will support you. These voices echo like chains you continue to drag, even when the door is already open. The external enemy no longer needs to do anything. You yourself have become your jailer. But the moment you let go of these beliefs is also the moment you understand that the shackles never existed. Politics guided by reality requires this clarity. You don't fight ghosts, you only free yourself from them. Letting go of the invisible weight is like breathing for the first time after years underwater. It's not just liberation, it's expansion. You discover yourself lighter, more strategic, more present, and this inevitably changes how others try to deal with you. Those who hope to manipulate your need for acceptance realize the tables have turned. And it's precisely at this point that the next silent battle begins, the psychological game of those who manipulate your need for acceptance. Few weapons are as effective as exploiting the human desire for acceptance. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek approval from family, school, and society, and it is precisely this need that becomes a loophole for manipulation. Machiavelli warned that the end justifies the means, and in this case the means is simple: praise or withhold recognition at the right time. Those who understand this psychological game can bend wills without raising their voice. Politics guided by reality shows that many allow themselves to be controlled, not by physical threats, but by the simple idea of being unwanted. Consider the corporate environment. A boss who masters this game rarely needs to yell. It's enough to withhold a compliment, delay a promotion, or drop a line, "I expected more from you." Immediately, the employee goes out of their way to regain approval. They don't realize they've fallen prey to the calculated use of the most subtle force there is. Better to be feared than loved finds an interesting nuance here. The fear of losing acceptance is often more paralyzing than the fear of losing money. And those who master this maintain loyal armies of their own, not out of genuine respect, but out of the need for validation they feed daily. This game doesn't just happen at work. Romantic relationships are fertile ground for this kind of manipulation. The partner who controls with calculated silences, the friend who only offers affection when you conform to her expectations. The appearance of virtue manifests itself in these scenarios. They seem like gestures of love, but they are currency. Virtue and fortune don't belong to those who beg for attention, but to those who have the courage not to bow to this emotional market. And this is where the Machiavellian paradox comes in. Only those who let go of the need for acceptance truly earn respect. Freeing yourself from this game requires a radical internal shift. You need to learn to say, "I don't need it," without fear of rejection. This isn't arrogance, it's clarity. It's as if someone removes the mask and shows that they no longer negotiate their worth for applause. In practice, this might mean refusing invitations that don't bring you joy, stopping over-justifying yourself, or refusing to submit to environments that demand self-effacement. Constant adaptability is key. Every time someone tries to manipulate your need for acceptance, you need to respond with silent firmness. This psychological game loses its power when the need for acceptance ceases to be prevalent. And the curious thing is that the moment you can say, "I don't need it," you realize that this gesture is worth more than any apparent achievement. It's a symbolic rupture. Dependence disappears and power shifts. But this state opens the way to another, even more radical territory, when saying, "I don't need it," is worth more than any achievement. There are times when the most powerful phrase isn't "I have achieved," but a simple "I don't need it." This small statement is more disarming than any medal displayed. Machiavelli reminded us that real power arises from clarity about human nature, and what most fear is losing what they believe is essential. When you demonstrate that you don't need what everyone seeks, be it approval, money, or status, you create a kind of silent authority that intimidates. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is the freedom to not submit. Saying "I don't need it" is declaring independence from a game that traps almost everyone. See how this works in everyday life. When someone tries to manipulate you by offering something in exchange for submission, the response, "I don't need that," destroys the negotiation instantly. It's as if a chain breaks right there. Better to be feared than loved takes on a new dimension. Those who don't need, don't beg. Those who don't beg, command respect. The calculated use of force lies precisely in the refusal to participate in the theater of necessity. And this gesture, though simple, generates brutal tension because it reveals a strength that depends on no one. This principle can be applied in practical areas. Think about finances. When you build multiple sources of income, you can confidently say, "I don't need this job." Or in relationships, when you develop solid self-esteem, you can say, "I don't need this validation," without guilt. In both cases, power shifts. Virtue and fortune accompany those who move without chains, because the world bows more easily to those who demonstrate autonomy. The appearance of virtue may deceive some, but true strength is revealed in detachment from the achievements that enslave. Interestingly, our entire society is structured so that you never say, "I don't need it." Consumption, politics, relationships, everything is built on reinforcing needs. Anyone who breaks this cycle threatens the balance of a system based on dependency. That's why this simple phrase sounds dangerous. Saying "I don't need it" is refusing to be manipulated by awards, titles, or praise. It's showing that your identity doesn't depend on applause. Constant adaptability sustains this position. Even without what everyone considers indispensable, you keep moving forward. And therein lies the most disturbing secret. Those who learn to say, "I don't need it," place themselves in a nearly invulnerable state. It's not about contempt, but about clarity. What was once a conquest is now merely incidental. And this state is disturbing because it reveals something even more feared, the dangerous state of those who have nothing left to lose. Few states are as feared as those who have nothing left to lose. This individual becomes unpredictable because he does not yield to threats. The enemy can shout, withdraw benefits, offer blackmail, and none of it works. Machiavelli knew that, in politics guided by reality, the most dangerous adversary is not the richest, but the one who has already abandoned attachment to wealth. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is the very freedom gained by losing everything. Better to be feared than loved never made so much sense. He who fears nothing is impossible to subdue. This state, however, isn't born solely of material ruin. It can arise from a conscious choice to cast off chains before they become prisons. Imagine someone who lets go of the need for social status. What can be used against them? Nothing. They no longer depend on the validation of others. This is the calculated use of force in its most extreme form, not striving for rewards, but living with absolute autonomy. Virtue and fortune accompany those who live on this edge, because life always favors those who don't harbor fears disguised as desires. History is replete with examples. Rebels, spiritual leaders, revolutionaries, all who reached the point of saying, "I have nothing to lose," changed the world order. In everyday life, the same applies in smaller but equally impactful ways. The employee who decides to leave a toxic job without fear of being fired, the person who ends an abusive relationship without fear of loneliness, each of them becomes dangerous to the system that tried to control them. The veneer of virtue that was once required dissolves, and the individual discovers they no longer owe anything to anyone. It's important to note that this state isn't chaos, but strategy. It's not about taking useless risks, but about understanding that true power comes from the absence of chains. Constant adaptability ensures that, even in the face of total loss, a person can reinvent themselves. And the world fears this type of individual because they no longer negotiate under pressure. When there's no fear of loss, there's no way to manipulate. Loyal armies follow precisely such leaders because they know their command is based not on fear, but on freedom. This dangerous state is simultaneously frightening and fascinating. Those who reach it realize that life cannot be controlled by promises or threats. There is nothing anyone can take away to bend your will. And it is at this point that the whole circle closes. From attachment as a chain to detachment as a silent power, revealing that true possession lies in letting go. Now you've realized that what seemed like protection was always a tether, and that what you called conquest was often just another invisible leash. The truth is harsh. As long as you remain trapped in the fear of losing, you'll be manipulated like a puppet in someone else's hands. But the moment you let go, that simple, brutal moment, changes everything. Ask yourself, what can't you truly let go of? What if it were ripped away today would make you beg to keep it? Could it be that this is precisely where your prison lies? And if the enemy already knows this, have you realized how predictable you are, how vulnerable you are? The provocation is clear. How long will you live carrying burdens you didn't choose? How long will you trade your peace for applause? How long will you remain small just to avoid displeasing? Power lies in a gesture few dare to make, letting go. And that's precisely why few are truly free. The invitation is direct. Dare to live without chains. Dare to say, "I don't need," even when everyone screams that you should cling. Dare to be feared by the silence of those who don't beg. Because only then will you discover that no one can hurt you anymore. And now I want to hear from you. What needs to be released today for your life to finally change course? Write in the comments, because sometimes the first step to liberation begins with a sentence written out loud. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue receiving truths that few have the courage to speak. The next cut could be the one that finally breaks the chain that still binds you.